Welcome, everybody. You're listening to The Sound of Pursuit. I'm Hal Humphreys, your host, and I am pretty excited today about the guest we have on the show. I've got Marcy Phelps joining me today. She's a professional researcher, licensed private investigator, certified fraud examiner. She's the author of Research on Main Street Using the Web to Find Local Businesses and Market Information, and she's a former librarian with a master's degree in library science. Now, she's the owner of Marcy Phelps and Associates, where she specializes in research and investigative storytelling and finds out what others might consider impossible. She's kind of a wizard. So, Marcy Phelps, thank you for being here today. I cannot thank you enough. Tell us a little bit about your background as a librarian and how you feel like that prepared you for what's next, which is being a private investigator.
Well, thank you, Hal. Well, I'm a librarian who never actually, only briefly worked in a library, in a physical library. Once I finished my master's, I started my business immediately. I started doing business and market intelligence, and then switched over to private investigations about 10, 11 years ago.
Okay.
But librarians are information experts. They know how to find it, use it, manage it, and share it, all of which I do every day in my PI business. Mostly librarians are very skilled at getting to what is actually the client's question. Mm-hmm. When I was a reference librarian, people would come up and ask a question about the blue book they read, 2 months ago and wanted to check it out again. It turned out to be a red book. That's a librarian joke, but so understanding the client's true question, understanding their needs, what sources best answer those questions, and how to best share that information in a way that they understand what you're telling them or understand the answers. So I use these librarian skills every day in my PI business.
I tell people all the time, they're like, you were a real estate appraiser and now you're a private investigator. It's like, well, I'm still a real estate appraiser too, but the skill set overlaps so much. There's so many of the research and analytical skills that I bring to it from real estate appraisal that work out really well in the PI world. And I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that librarians they're researchers. They know how to find and, as you said, manage and interpret information. So I think that's crazy useful skill set. And, there are a couple of folks in the PI community that I know of who are, have a master's in library sciences. And I always like talking to librarians because they tend to point me in the right direction. I had a project over in East Tennessee, and it was an older case involving mesothelioma claims, and there was an old auto shop where this guy had worked on a certain kind of brake pads, and we needed to find the house where the guy grew up and verify a bunch of information about the house and the neighborhood and the houses in the neighborhood. And when I'm doing research like that, one of my first stops is the library because I'm looking for the crisscross directories that they have in the old crisscross directories. And then librarians can point you to newspaper articles and stuff like that you hadn't thought of. So we're going to be talking about due diligence. Now, you're an online research and due diligence specialist. So what is due diligence? What does that mean? I hear people throw that word around all the time. What does due diligence mean?
Due diligence is a thorough investigation of an individual and or a company before the transaction. So a lot of people talk about doing due diligence after they find fraud or after they've been in business. That's not due diligence. Due diligence is before you sign the contract. There are all types of due diligence. There's financial, legal, um, operations, even market and competitor due diligence. But I specialize in the background investigation part of due diligence, where you do a deep dive into the past and the current situations surrounding key individuals and companies.
Okay. Tell me this. What does a due diligence investigation entail, and why does it need to be done by a private investigator?
So, with a due diligence investigation, you're getting a full profile, a 365-degree view of the individual or the company. You're looking at the good and the bad again, because you want a complete profile. You want to see if it's a cultural match, in the case of a merger or an acquisition. Um, so a lot of people confuse due diligence background investigations with employment check or a compliance check, and they're very different things. With employment, that of course falls under the Fair Credit Reporting Act and other laws that place limitations on how you go about it, how far back you go in somebody's past. Due diligence does not fall under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. You technically don't need somebody's permission to run a due diligence check unless you're looking at a degree, trying to verify a degree.
Hmm.
Um, for employment and compliance, you're looking for problems. And as I've said, in due diligence, you want the good and the bad. As one client calls it, they like to get the color. They want to see what this person is all about. And you're not going to get that by just looking at the negative news, for example, or going back only a certain amount of time. So.
And I can imagine, I'm just going to throw a hypothetical out there for you, but if a company like Patagonia was looking for a new, I don't know, chief financial officer, and they got this really highly qualified person from Wall Street, but that person does not hold the same values that Patagonia has as a company, that's something they need to know.
Absolutely. If there's any kind of cultural mismatch, that just adds to the risk. And anytime there's high risk, that can affect the bottom line. It's
Yeah.
so even something like that, especially
Okay.
with a company like that is so values based.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. You've got a new course coming up at PI Education about due diligence. And I'm really excited about that because I think your courses are some of the best we have to offer because you know how
Thank
to deliver the information in a meaningful way. Um, but in that course, you kind of get into a 3-step process for due diligence investigations. I don't want to give away the whole course right here, but what are the 3 steps?
When you're conducting research, it's important that you first prepare before the second step, which is gathering information, and the third step is taking action. So, in the first step, preparation, that's where you understand your client's needs. What stage of the deal are they in? And that'll inform how deep to go, because there are a lot of different levels of due diligence. There's the quick pass, a deeper dive online, and then you have boots on the ground research. And not everybody needs that at that particular stage of the deal. So understanding the why and what they're looking for, what's important. I have one client in my hedge fund due diligence area that anything on their regulatory record, anything negative, is a big no-no. But I have another client that when I messaged him that, oh, I found 3 regulatory issues, he was like, oh, that's all? No problem. So you have to understand what their level of risk is in the preparation phase. Gather any known information. Usually in due diligence, you get some supplied info because you're going to be verifying that and seeing what they leave out. And understanding your sources and which are the best. So preparation is probably, I'd say, what definitely longer. It takes longer than the second phase, the actual gathering of information, searching your databases, the open web, on the boots on the ground investigations at the courthouse, for example, if you need it. The last step is action. I call it action, and that's synthesizing, doing something with the information you found rather than a rip and ship. Connecting the dots, seeing what's missing, doing any follow-up. Sometimes we do updates or ongoing monitoring to see if there are any changes. So you have to actually do something to that information that you find. Otherwise, it's just bits of data. And as we've talked about before, that's where people forget that part. And I've seen way too many kind of doctored up comprehensive reports, which may or may not have been verified, and
Yeah, I mean, you see a client. I got a call from a client not long ago. Said, "Hey, I got this background investigation done by this private investigator. Do you mind to look over it and see if there's anything else we need to look for?" And I know the format, right? I know I know which database it came from because I know the format, and I know that they downloaded it in a Word format and then took out the branding for the database and then put their company branding on there. And it's like, really? That's all you're going to do? And they charged pretty good money for just searching one of the available databases for private investigators. So I love the idea of preparing, gathering, and then taking action, and that puts us in the realm of being more of an analyst than a document puller, right? It takes us to where we're gathering information, we're verifying information, and then we're analyzing that information. That's the value that we bring as private investigators, I think.
Absolutely. I've always said I'm not a data broker. I am an analyst, and I bring meaning to the information, specifically what it means to my client, not just anyone in general. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What do people oftentimes get wrong about the how of due diligence?
Well, there are a lot of myths about due diligence. Well, they get it wrong that it's often, there's the online issues, that it's not all online. There's no one database. With due diligence, you're going to be using multiple sources, proprietary and free sources. I see a lot of investigators doing due diligence with just free resources. And, you know, it works both ways. I find things in the proprietary databases, and that's plural, more than one type, that I don't find in the free sources. And then nowadays I find things through Google that I don't find through LexisNexis. So you have to use a combination of sources. There's the misconception that it's fast and easy, which it's not. As we've talked about, there's a lot of analysis going on. And then specifically to due diligence, I think one of the biggest mistakes is just looking for the negative information, and not getting that full profile. Is this somebody my client can work with on an ongoing basis? What are their hobbies? What that just tells you something about someone's character. So
Yeah, yeah, and I think yeah, I mean, getting the whole picture is always important, and I think a lot of people miss that, and just going after the dirt only paints one side of the picture. Um, you talked earlier about due diligence is done before the transaction, it's done before the hire, so before these things. What do you wish companies knew about why they should be doing due diligence before the big executive hire or merger or whatever? What do you wish they would understand about that better?
well, that that it all affects the bottom line. Any kind of reputational risk. I think a lot of us have heard the story about the Samsonite CEO who faked a PhD degree, I think. Now, you don't even need a PhD degree to be a CEO, so there is no reason for this. When it all came out, their stocks plummeted. So, a silly little thing like that had a big impact on their shareholders and their company. And like I said, you're going in the case of a merger or a long-term investment, an ongoing investment, you're going to be in business with this person or this company for a long time. Or you're investing $65 million of your client's money, you better make sure that there's been no fraud in someone's background before, because the past kind of helps predict the future. If somebody's committed a fraud in their past, it's quite possible they'll do it again.
And
So it all boils down to the bottom line.
in my experience, if somebody makes a hire, brings somebody on the team, and that person then commits fraud, someone's going to go back and find the original fraud in the first place, right? So why not do it ahead of time as opposed to after the thing has happened?
And that's a big reputational kind of ding. If people say, "Why didn't you know about this?" And it makes you look, or your company look, like it's not quite capable of doing
Yeah.
business. So,
Yeah.
but to clarify, the hire part, if you're actually hiring, that falls under Fair Credit Reporting Act. So
Okay.
usually in the case of executive hires, due diligence is used to kind of gather a pool of possibilities. But it's kind of a fine line sometimes with due diligence. So you have to understand your purpose.
Yeah, I mean, there's some gray areas in an acquisition where you're buying a company with staff in place. Does that fall under hiring practices, or are you part of the mergers and acquisitions? And this is one of the things I'm assuming you're going to talk about in your class.
It is. It is on my online course. I do talk about that, and the differences and the laws you need to follow within due diligence and the laws that don't apply too.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Marcy. You've been doing this for some time. you're, I mean, I would say you're nationally recognized as one of the best in the business. Now, that means different things to different people. It doesn't mean everybody in the country knows who Marcy Phelps is, but I will say this: everybody in the kind of top tier investigative world knows who you are. Do you have any crazy stories or any favorite stories from your work as due diligence investigator?
Well, I like to joke, and due diligence is not exciting. You don't see the exciting things that someone who's doing criminal defense, let's say, or something more exciting. Most of our people are just have lead very, clean lives, and but occasionally you find people and you just shake your head. One of my favorite stories, and it's a favorite because with due diligence, I don't usually find out what the outcome is. I don't
Mm,
know if my clients invested or done the merger. But this time they came back to me and thanked me and told me the outcome. We do check. If my favorite expression is, if you want to catch a crook, check their verify their degree. And this is where most people lie. Um, and this particular individual actually did have an MBA, as he claimed on the release form that we get. He claimed it was, and I don't remember which university, but it was quite prestigious, a big deal, I guess. Um, I found out that he did, in fact, have an MBA, but it was from a state university. And I was a little offended because I got my degree from a state university. But I reported this and immediately to my client. I don't wait till the report is done when I find a big red flag like that. Um, I notified this client right away, and she told me that they said to their company that they were going to invest in, either he goes or we go. And within hours, his name was off the website. Um,
wow.
so I never do usually hear that kind of outcome, and that was quite satisfying. So that's probably one of my most fun stories.
I love it. I love it. It's nice when you get to find out what happened after you did all the work. All right. So you've got several other courses with PI education. Tell us about some of the other courses you have, maybe which one is best for rookie researchers and which one is better for deeper dives for more advanced investigators.
Okay, I think I have, besides the due diligence, I have four courses on the PI education platform. Uh, the first, how to search online public records like a pro.
Okay.
And then another one is research secrets from a private investigator. And those two, I would say, are good for PIs who are just starting out, because they give the research secrets goes into that 3-step process that we talked about and how it can be used for really any kind of research that you're doing. And it's a good way to ramp up your research skills. And the public records is a broad overview of all types of public records, um, the the challenges, how to work around those challenges on the online public records specifically. Then I've started a series called Mastering Online Public Records, and where I go into specific types of public records, and that's more advanced. And the two that I've completed are business registrations and recorded documents. So those recorded documents are like deeds, that type of land records, and also vital records are recorded documents, and they have unique challenges, and I address those. And the business registrations, well, that's pretty self-explanatory, but they're extremely valuable for PI work.
One of the things I love about recorded documents, and I'm thinking specifically of like you go to the Register of Deeds office, and it's not just deeds in there. There will be miscellaneous agreements. Sometimes leases are filed in there. Sometimes subdivision covenants are filed in there. But if you're looking at land records in a deed, and this is just like, I'm going to throw this out there as one of the little things that I know that I think is really kind of cool. If you're doing historical research, in every deed that I've come across in the country, there will be a legal description of the property in some form or fashion. And then immediately underneath that, there will be what we call a derivation clause, which says this is a property sold to so-and-so by so-and-so in deed book, whatever. And it's the most immediately past deed. And then you go to the other one after that, and the next one after that, and after that. Go all the way back to the beginning of state records a lot of times. Just with that one little clause that says this is where this came from.
It's fascinating to be able to get a property history, ownership history. Very often you'll find maps in the recorded documents. So anyone who's, even if you're going to do surveillance or serve process, it might be helpful to know what's behind the property. It's very helpful for any type of investigative work.
I was working on a project here in Tennessee years ago, and it was in a small county kind of west of here, and I was able to trace the ownership back to the deed/treaty where the U.S. government acquired a huge swath of land from the Cherokee and Choctaw joint hunting ground. And just by following like a 2023 deed all the way back to the treaty where the U.S. government acquired the property from the Cherokee Indians and the Choctaw Indians. I don't know. I find that kind of stuff fascinating. It's a part of research that kind of, hits me in the right spot. So yeah, look, for investigators out there that are listening to the podcast, I can say without hesitation, Marcy Phelps does one of the best jobs of explaining in detail how to get yourself deep into public records and due diligence research. Marcy, is there anything else that I should have covered in this podcast today that we didn't really touch on that you would like to touch on?
Not really, other than I love working with you and Kim and Stephanie. It's a great platform, and it's been awesome working with you.
Well, that's very kind of you. And yes, a shout out to the entire PI education team, Stephanie Mitchell, Kim Green. If you pay attention to Pursuit Magazine, The Sound of Pursuit, or any of the PI education products, you'll know those two names because Stephanie runs this business with an iron fist, pretty much by herself. We've got staff available for her, but she kind of does everything on her own. Kim Green puts together everything that is published for Pursuit Magazine. She deals with the podcast publishing, and she's fantastic. And Marcy, thank you for giving a shout out to those guys. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. For our private investigators listening out there, even if you're not a private investigator, this might be an interesting course for you. If you're just a curious, investigative journalist or someone that wants to learn how to do better research, this would be a great class for you. You can go over to pieducation.com and learn to find things other people can't. Marcy, thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Hal.
And that is your sound of pursuit for this week. We look forward to seeing you next time.